All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm excited about this guest here tonight because a couple of different times, either I was sick, he was sick, or different scheduling conflicts arose. But I'm telling you, I really got a shot in the arm when he messaged me a little while ago because I was out. I was at my local place of eating with one of our listeners, and I'm like, am I going to do this? And then he messages me like, you know what? I got to go live 2 more times before tonight. Let's do it. This will kind of be the opening act of a busy next couple of days on Sportswire Radio. Most people are taking vacations, bagging it in, phoning it in for 2022. Not us here, but I promise you, this guy is going to be worth it because his journey when it comes into the world of professional wrestling, he's been a champion in multiple companies. He's also a big-time star from one of our favorite companies of late, the Wrestling War Zone with Darrow Johnson, also Valley Wrestling Connection. They both have two huge shows coming up, Pandemonium Wrestling, and also he's got a background in music, and he's got a connection to a friend of Sportswire Radio. So we'll get into all of that here shortly. So wait for it, further ado here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, pro wrestling star here from the Wrestling War Zone, Valley Wrestling Connection, and Pandemonium Wrestling. That is Jorel. Diez. My friend, welcome
Nice.
aboard.
Nice. That was great. I like the introduction. There's so much energy.
I'm an energy person. Everything in my life, anything I've done, whether it's this, whether it's been music, whether it's been my career in politics, whatever it is, I've always been an energy person. If you don't have energy, if you can't feel it, you ain't going to be successful. So you know a lot about that. It is a tremendous honor to have you here because I've been waiting for this for a while. I think our friends over at the Wrestling War Zone have been waiting for this for a while. We'll get into your story in a second here as well, but set the tables first because we have some really big shows come up. I know we're still in 2022, but 2023 is right around the corner, and you're pretty much going right into it. First with the Wrestling War Zone coming up here on February the 4th and Valley Wrestling Connection on February the 11th. So set the tables for us first on what we can expect at the Wrestling War Zone February the 4th.
Well, at Wrestling Warzone, I mean, we took a little bit of a time off for the rest of the year, and now we're coming back really strong with a 7-match card that's completely different guys that usually wrestle in the San Diego area. And as Enoch and Superman, I've been able to meet so many talented wrestlers that aren't on the radar. And I'm hoping that we can give them a platform where they can really get seen. Somebody like Wrestling with Unicorns. I don't know if you know them. They get a lot of people out there, and they're someone that I'm really looking into bringing out to help cover our shows. So not with this one, but probably with the one in March. We've got March 10th and March 11th as well. March 10th, we're doing Wrestle Warzone. We're doing it. We found a new venue to do like a Friday night fight night where we have more like a relaxed like ambiance. It's by the college. You can come and have a little bit more fun, and the characters are really more outlandish, like something like a smaller Hood Slam or something. They do such awesome work. So to be able to get some inspiration with them and just find our own kind of way to do it.
That's pretty cool, and I'm curious, and for those that are listening and watching, about the San Diego wrestling scene. Now, obviously, if you're a huge wrestling fan like I am, you automatically think of, well, the likes of a Rey Mysterio, and you think of some local people that I'll get into later on that we've seen in places like AEW Dark. I guess to an extent, I think Conan spent some time in San Diego, but certainly San Diego and the wrestling scene, for those that are listening and watching here, I mean, talk about the scene and how vibrant it is and what we can see from here coming up with the Wrestling War Zone.
I mean, everybody talks about LA. They talk about Hollywood. They forget about places like San Diego. They forget about places like the Bay that are really trying to have a resurgence. Like with West Coast Pro in the Bay, they're starting to really blow up and get some eyes on them. And then now in San Diego, I'm trying to bring something that's gonna give that kind of GCW or even early 2000s PWG style
Sure.
vibe where everybody's going out there and just having a good match, but also with stories. I mean, a lot of PWG was more like exhibition matches, where it's just you go out there, you fight, and there's not so much, like, it doesn't really go beyond that. Maybe like one or two matches, but here, I've written out storylines for already the next 6 months, so we have a direction as to where we're going, and using a lot of talents that are kind of disgruntled with the way that things are run in that area. So it's just trying to bring a place that's like inclusive. We give people a chance, but we also look for people that are good talents. It's not like anybody can step in just because you need a shot. You got to deserve it.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. And you bring up so many interesting things here. You literally have opened up the Pandora's box, as some would say, because you talk about writing these shows. Now, I've interviewed a lot of professional wrestlers, as you may or may not know, and
Yeah.
Darrow I've gotten to know here over the past several weeks. And I'm so fascinated to the point that you are still competing actively as a wrestler in these companies, but yet you're also the guy that's got the book and the pen.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you separate both those things? Because that's always almost like that's a really, like, no pun intended, like a sketchy place to be sometimes,
Yeah.
because when you're still active and then you're the guy that's booking these things. I mean, you see it all the time. You read the stories, whether it's with the dirt sheets or people famously. Kevin Nash, some would say, booked himself to be WCW world champion back in the day. And Triple H famously is out there. There's a long list of people. Most recently in AEW, you had Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks kind of were sort of involved with that. I mean, it's a long list, but how do you kind of maybe differentiate those two tasks that you have? I'm so fascinated by that.
I guess it's kind of, I'm blessed that, well, I'm not really blessed, but I guess it's a
Don't
double-edged
say
sword.
that. You're blessed. You are
But
blessed.
I am, but in the sense that I'm not competing on a full-time scale. So,
Okay.
I mean, I wrestled maybe 4 times last year.
Okay.
I more do Enoch. Um, it's just I'm so, like, once I retired, I became Enoch. I started to see wrestling in a completely different lens, and now more than ever, I want to incorporate that in my matches. But my body, I just don't have the body to take all those bumps. I started when I was 15, and I'm 35, so
That's a lot of bumps on the card. There's
it's
a thing
it's
called the bump card. 20
yeah,
years is a lot of matches out there. Listen, I was listening to a documentary. It was on Tubi yesterday, and it talked about Kevin Sullivan, who was, of course, famously the WCW booker, ECW guy, and he had 10,000 matches. And I
yeah.
don't know, I'm like, how is this guy still doing it? So I could imagine you've wrestled a lot of matches in 20 years. That's a lot. It's a lot of bumps, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And to now segue back to your question, since
Sure.
all I'm really worried about now is booking Enoch, I basically just book him in the way that others would book me, which is usually I'm in a stable, and then I'm in like 1 or 2 matches as like as their manager, and I come out and I get heat, I rile up the crowd, and I just try to not make the show about me. But it can be tough because I feel like there's a lot of people that I'm with that don't exactly have personalities of their own. And as a manager, you're supposed to enhance that person. But how do you enhance the person without making yourself the center of attention?
Mm.
So it's a tightrope from being a professional wrestler for 15, 16 years and now being a manager for 4 years. It's so different because you kind of want to be that center of attention, but you can't, because then people are like, oh, this dude's just all about getting himself over. But it's what do you
Yeah, it's a tough almost balancing act, because you certainly know things maybe more in a way than someone else, but then you have to be objective. You always have to be objective. And I want to give a shout out to a fellow wrestler that is tuned in here with us, maybe somebody that you might want to keep an eye on. He's here from us on the other side of the pond, and his name is the Lawman, Kyle Kennedy, and the Lawman Kyle Kennedy was voted most
Ooh.
hated wrestler of the year in non-stop action wrestling in the UK. He was their company's world champion for a very brief moment this past year. He was also
Congrats.
part of the group of the year with the society. Was himself Remus Kane, a big time star in UKW, and Callum and Jake. So they've been regulars here to Sportswire Radio. So if you're ever looking for talent, you can follow the Lawman Kyle Kennedy, also nonstop action wrestling on Facebook as well. But I mean, talk to me then in terms of the Wrestling War Zone, February the 4th, in one or two things as to why people should follow the group and on Facebook and showing up to the show. Because I have a feeling from what you've said so far, we'll come back to your story, but I have a feeling this is going to be a knockout card.
Well, I think that a lot of people that run wrestling shows run them without actually being wrestlers and without having ever even taken a bump themselves. And I've collected talent that I've scouted from being a wrestler to being a manager to just watching them as a fan when I had to retire for a while, and just like really compiling the best talent that I could find that's a hybrid of styles, from lucha to, amateur shoot style wrestling to strong style to just all around American wrestling. And I think from top to bottom, we've got a really good collection of talent that encompasses what Southern California is.
Absolutely. No question about it. Southern California, of course, is legendary for a lot of things, and especially the professional wrestling scene. And I'm curious on something you said, and I'll get to another wrestler that is tuned in to say hello. So I have a feeling this is the second night in a row I'm getting this, so this is a good thing. I'm curious when you said in terms of, let's say, the different types of wrestling, whether it's lucha, whether it's, let's say, more of a brawling type, or let's say different types of wrestling, and let's say MMA type as an example. For somebody like yourself that has the experience and you're kind of now looking at it from more of a scouting point of view, how do you go about maybe looking for that talent and kind of saying, you know what, I've got a show and I've only got 7 matches, I've got maybe 20 people I've got to book. Let's say 20 people as an example, not counting a rumble for say. How do you go about that in finding all these different types of talent?
So, I mean, of course, like anybody else, we all have our preferences. We all have people we like, that we prefer, that are go-tos. We reach out to them first. And then I feel like everything just kind of falls into place. Like, you think of what do you want? Like, okay, this guy's a hardcore wrestler. I want him on the show. So now I need someone that's hardcore to go against him. So now I look for a guy that matches that, but that's also entertaining. Now, this other show, the first match on the show is going to be at a college style crowd, and we're, cannabis and drinking is encouraged.
That reminds me of the old WCW spring break shows they used to have.
Yeah.
They used to have. So it's that same vibe, vibe.
That same vibe. And so the first match that I put on, I'm thinking, oh man, I got to do it big. And no, I have 2 friends. One that does, his name is Ronnie Angel. And I was like, you need to be more heel. He does like an book author, like famous guy. He's released a bunch of books. And so he kind of like rubs that in people's faces. So that's his gimmick. And I was like, no, you need to be like Ronald Cornelius Angel. I think that's like way more douchey. Or Ronald, like Ronald C. Angel, just something. And so we turned that into Ronald C. Angel. So now he is that book author, comes out. He's stuffy. He's a prude, and he's wrestling my friend Austin, who plays the party captain, Guy Cool. Check him out. He's awesome too. And he brings the energy, comes out with a megaphone, comes out with girls by his side. He's partying. So now, both these guys might not be PWG kind of wrestlers, but they're going to go out there and they're going to put on a show for the crowd that would only work in that spot. So sometimes the ideas just pop up and you're like, whoa, wait, what about that guy? Or they hit you up and you're like, wait, no, that works perfectly for that spot. Or no, like I see you here, like you see yourself as a heel, but I think you could really be a face. And I put you with this girl by your side. And then all of a sudden they pop in a different way. And it's so crazy to be someone that only cared about my bookings to now be so fulfilled from getting everybody else's bookings and giving them a chance, you know?
That's so cool. No, that's definitely so cool. So I have a couple of comments. Let me get to some wrestlers that want to speak to you. One of them, of course, is one of our other people on
So,
Sportswire
yeah.
Radio that's a frequent guest. That is Dan Robertson. Dan is the Cult of Killjoy. He is also from Nonstop Action Wrestling, also Blackheart Wrestling. We've seen him in GT Ministries, all great companies in the UK. He says, "Evening from the Cult." The lawman Kyle Kennedy has a message for you. Need a lawman? Hit the DMs. DMs are open. We also certainly want to give a shout out to, if I can say it, Craven Rage from Wrestling Championship Entertainment in the state of Wisconsin. So a little bit more local. And of course,
Yeah.
he is the Universal Grand Slam Wisconsinite champion for that promotion. So give him a big, big shout out. So certainly we want to thank all those different people. And I want people to follow Jorel Diez. You can do that at Enoch _the _enlightened. Also check him out. Also Valley Wrestling Connection on Instagram as well. Also Facebook Wrestling Warzone. Please support these great companies. And we'll see Jorel on February the 11th at Valley Wrestling Connection. We're going to see you with Honest John against the mighty Tortuga, I believe it's Tortuga.
Yeah, Tortuga, yeah.
Tortuga. That's why I wanted to make sure I get that one right. I mean, what can we expect there then with you? We're going to see you there in action with Honest John coming up on February the 11th. And give us a little bit of insight on the Valley Wrestling Connection next show.
Well, I mean, as far as the match itself goes, I love working with John. He's one of my favorite people in the business. And it's really been humbling to kind of work with him because he's someone that told me that I was like the first match that he saw. But then I didn't know that until like a year and a half later. So I had been working with him and I'm like, dude, this guy is so good. Like so many people in wrestling don't have characters, but this guy has like that it factor, you know, and then to know and be humbled to know that I was one of the first matches and a reason why he got into it because he saw Latino the meat man against the vegan Superman, you know, like that was just so, you know, it just kind of hooked him. It was really cool. And so to be able to bring him in and play like an Edge and Christian, like best friends, like rich kind of frat guys kind of role. And Tortuga's like, he's like a big face everywhere he goes. He's the king baby face. He's just built. He's built like a tank. You know,
I see. He's definitely built like a tank. There's no question about that.
Yeah, he's not that tall, so he's more like a Taz, I would say. You know,
you know what? He kind of had that Taz, a little bit of that kind of old Taz vibe, a little bit to it. Maybe even a little bit of like a Bryan Danielson in terms of that height and that muscular look. Now Bryan Danielson now kind of where he's really muscular, kind of.
Oh yeah, exactly. And so I think with Honest John being an old school style heel with Tortuga, who's like an old school style baby face, is just like that perfect, not so much as a marquee style match, but to kind of show what we're about, you know? I mean, that's not the main event. We got Haas Hogg against.
That was my next one I was going to get to, and I see you're also in Haas's corner as well. I see.
Yeah, so Haas is one of my best friends. Once again, you know, like I was 17 and he was 7,
wow,
he was like I'm not that old. He was 10. So
no, you said you were 35. So I mean, 35 is like we're in the same
28.
age range. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, and so he's always been like a little brother. He'd come see me wrestle, and then so any chance that I get to kind of represent the people that I believe in, you know, it's so much easier to act when it comes from a part of you that you actually believe, you know. So like I believe in that guy. I believe in Honest John, and that's why it's so easy to represent these guys, to represent Vito Fratelli, because he's on a warpath right now. He's, you know, doing AAA. He's blowing up in Mexico, you know, but nobody's using him to his full potential here in Cali, in the States at all, you know.
Well, we definitely need to make some changes to that. I have some more comments, so let me get to a bunch. Dan Robertson, also the Cult of Killjoy, of course, from Nonstop Action Wrestling and Blackheart Wrestling, has a message for you. I second what the lawman has to say. If you ever need a couple of Brit wrestlers, best let us know. Much luck to you, my friend, with the Black Heart. Anthony Finkel, my very dear friend, who I've went to some wrestling shows with. We're friends with a wrestler from House of Glory, a trainee, Chris Urban, the Urban Warrior company. I got to be honest, House of Glory, I liked it, but it's a little bit, it's not my cup of tea, I have to say. I mean, I enjoyed what they bring to the table. Some of
That
it was great, some of it was kind of a mixed bag, but
is that
we did go to
Red's
some.
is that Red's
Yes,
gimmick?
that's his company. Yes, he's
Oh,
the
okay.
yeah, I mean, low key's a part of it. I mean, they had some, they have some. House of Black was there. I mean, look, I went to a couple shows, but some of it, it's just not. I see we do a lot of British wrestling on Sportswire, so I'm so into that thing. So
Hold on one second.
that's, yeah, no problem. But while you do that, I do want to give Anthony a big shout out. He is, of course, from Brooklyn, New York. He also gives us the wrestling emoji. And Anthony says, the Meat Man, this is a family show. Yeah, I think we was talking about his gimmick. And while we wait for Jorel, again, please follow Jorel Diez. Enoch _the _enlightened. He is a part of Valley Wrestling Connection. Also, the Wrestling War Zone does a number of different things, and I'm excited to get into that here with him on Sportswire Radio. Also does some music. He's also the head booker over at our friends over at Wrestling War Zone. I want to thank also Darrow Johnson for supporting us and giving us this opportunity to speak with Jorel on his journey. And Joel, I've got another question for you, which I wanted to purposely wait until you came back, and that is, of course, from Craven Rage. And I know I asked it before, but people for tuning in once again, where are you guys located?
As for World Wrestling Warzone or
Both.
what's
Give
specific?
us both. Give us both.
Oh, Wrestle Warzone is in San Diego, and Valley Wrestling Connection is in Marietta. So it's a little north of San Diego, about an hour.
Okay. All right. Very, very cool stuff. And of course, Wrestling Championship Entertainment, they are in the state of Wisconsin, Appleton, Wisconsin. And you can follow them at WCEHeat.com, WCE on Facebook, which is at Wrestling Championship Entertainment, YouTube as well. So thank you for those questions. And then I was curious also, and I had to bring up Darrow Johnson because obviously Darrow's the man that connected us here. And give me a story about Darrow, how you guys kind of hooked up, and obviously he's been a supporter of ours here on Sportswire. He's caught some of our streams, and he's kind of the reason why we're speaking right now. So I kind of wanted to ask you and about Darrow Johnson and kind of how you guys hooked up and what's it been like working with him.
Darrow, I mean, to say it really plainly, is a great dude. He's just,
I could see that just speaking
he's
with
all
him,
heart. He's all heart. And I had seen him around. He used to do like a Obama character, and I see like wrestling, and then as of like last year, I'd kind of see him around at the shows at One Ring Circus, and then he said, "Hey, I'm going to be doing my own shows. I'll reach out to you." And everybody says that, so you never really think anything of it. So
Sure.
when he started doing his own shows, I hit him up and I was like, "Hey, I'd love to just come down and check out the product." And he was like, "All right." And he had me come in. And when I got there, he was like, "Hey, whatever you want to do." C Love told me, he's like, "You trust Jorel 100%. He's like, whatever Jorel says to do, you do it. And he's like, so it's all up to you. And I noticed that he had kind of done that with the other matches. So I know how trusting he is. And so I had to step in and kind of help to steer the ship. And, and so I didn't want to see him get taken advantage of. And so I was like, Darrow, let's start working together. That way I can talk to these guys because they're my peers. They'll have a little bit more respect for me, and you can just kind of like help me book and kind of like be the promoter and all that stuff, and just let me handle this kind of stuff because they're not going to kind of dick me around.
All right, that makes a lot of sense, and I could see a little bit of the Obama in him a little bit. He's got a little bit of that vibe. He's got the looks. He's certainly, obviously, somebody that we're very, very happy to know here on Sportswire Radio. And I do want to go back to Vito Fratelli. Obviously, he's the Valley Wrestling Connection World Champion, and he's a guy that obviously is carrying the company. And when you look for a world champion, and especially somebody like a Vito, I mean, is he kind of the prototype world champion, your opinion, or somebody that, hey, you know what, this is the guy that I can give the ball to? Because I interview a lot of wrestlers who are world champions. We had one in the UK, Disciple, who's actually a world champion, and two, major promotions in the UK. And I always feel like it's important to talk about your world champion and Vito Fratelli. And I mean, talk to me further about him. And is he kind of, in a way, almost the prototype world champion? Because you've been a world champion. So when I ask you
Yeah.
this question, it's a little different than somebody else I may ask that question to.
Right. Just to clarify, he is the Wrestle Warzone heavyweight champion.
Okay.
We haven't even had our first show for VWC.
He's the social heavyweight champion then.
Yeah. Yep. We have our belt already, but we probably won't be crowning a champion until like the fourth show. But with Vito, man, I've known Vito since we used to wrestle in the backyard together.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're talking about 21, 22 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
Kids. Okay. So, and he always had a good hustle about him, and he would just do his thing, and just kept hustling and keeping his mouth closed. And as everybody was just moving up, and then all of a sudden he just started to catch fire. He got with the right people. He got the right training. He got the right people to believe in him. And he's just really had an amazing, I'd say, since COVID came back. I mean, since we came back from COVID, as I wanted to say, that was a completely different sense. It's that he's really just started to take off, and his matches are next level. Like, he's able to keep up with these guys that are AAA, like main event level talent. And
that's a different wrestling style. That is a different type of wrestler than what you see in any other company. That is a whole different ballgame. So what he's doing there is second to none.
I mean, and he could put on matches with anybody, American style, lucha style, and he's got base. Like, he takes care of people. And that's what I was going to segue back to talking about House of Glory. When I met Amazing Red, they say don't meet your heroes because they're gonna disappoint you. And Red was one of the coolest people that I've ever met in the business. And we were practicing some stuff backstage. He was nervous. He didn't want to do any of his Hurricane Ranas or anything like that. He told me that people that were twice my size would drop him on his head when he would go for a simple Hurricane Rana, and this guy's 250 pounds full of muscle and would drop him straight on his head. Because these American guys, they can't base. They can't take care of people like that. And so that's actually how, Chris Jericho came up with the Lion Tamer, because the guy went not for the Lion Tamer, but that counter. He went for the Hurricane Rana, and Jericho at the last minute pulled back, and the guy almost hit his head on the ground, and then he just clinched it in. And was like, oh, cool. And that's how we came up with that version of the Lion Tamer. But I'm rounding the entire world to come back and say that Vito is just a fantastic worker, and no matter who I put him in there, he's going to deliver. So yeah, he's a prototype champion, is what anybody would want their champion to be.
And he's definitely somebody that people need to follow out there on social media, because he's one of these guys, just looking at him and looking what he brings to the table. It doesn't matter what promotion he's a champion for. He's definitely a prototype world champion. We are here with Jorel Diez, and my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. And if you like what you hear from us on Sportswire Radio, please continue to give us a like on Facebook at Sportswire Radio, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can listen to all of our great content on sportnarium.com/player. We'll be back here with double duty tomorrow. We'll have on Joel Cobra from the Modern Day Mafia of Colory Championship Wrestling in the UK. Then we swing back around to upstate New York with C2K Courage to Kill. We speak about RWA and some other things with him. And then our last official interview segment is on Thursday with the Irish Wonder double champion Chris Murphy, most notably of Nonstop Action Wrestling. So Joel Cobra's 8 p.m. British Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 12 o'clock Pacific Time. Then we'll have on C2K. It'll be about, I think, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 4:30 Pacific Standard Time. It'll be midnight, a little after midnight UK time, and then Chris Murphy, 9 o'clock British Standard Time. But in the meantime, we are here with Jorel Diez. And Jorel, I wanted to ask you about your journey, and I know you've won a number of different championships, and I did want to ask you, and what did it mean to you to be, let's go first with the Empire Wrestling Federation Cruiserweight Champion? Talk to me about what that championship meant to you.
Well, that to me meant a lot because, in any single type of sport and any single type of performance art, there's going to be people that are more popular and more popular groups that are harder to break into. So out here, it was at the time, it was Empire Wrestling. It was Alternative Wrestling Show, AWS, whatever championship wrestling from Hollywood was at that point. I don't even remember. But those were basically like where the cool kids went. And if you were able to win there, it meant something. So I had won some other belts, but at that point, that was the biggest one for me. And I did it with my friend Ryan Kidd. Not Ryan Kidd, it was Ryan Taylor, who went on to be Russ Taylor in Ring of Honor. He
Yep.
was in the Diamond Mine in
Yep.
NXT.
Yep.
So he and I had match of the year match that year, and that's what kind of helped to push my career forward. At that time, I was wrestling him. I went on to beat Jack Evans for the Epic Heavyweight Championship, and my career just started moving forward after that. Working with a lot of people.
That's a pretty cool thing. And also wanted to ask you about being the Finest City XRT champion, and talk to me about that championship and what was that like?
So that's actually at the tail end of my run. So I had kind of was winding down with the wrestling, and I wanted to give it one last chance, and I came up with the vegan Superman character. And my friend Gus owned FCW at the time, and he was like, all right, if you go full force with the vegan thing, and I had this entrance music that was like, give me the greens, give me the roots, I'm a vegan, and, and I came out with the full like Superman gear and all that stuff. And I ended up winning it in a 6-way match. And the last two were myself and Leo Rush.
Oh, wow. What a small world. What a small world.
Yeah.
I'd rather talk to you than Leo Rush. I'll tell you that much.
Oh, he is not the most humble guy. We almost got it back. We almost got
Yeah,
it.
I don't want to say nothing because I speak with so many wrestlers, but I've definitely heard. I try to keep my nose away from that stuff, but I can only imagine. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I mean, but he was a professional. He made me look good. I mean, I was
Okay.
a big old fat guy at the time, and he looked at me and was probably like, dude, this guy, really? Okay. But, and I think I impressed him a little bit, because I was moving well and I kept up with him. So, I mean, I don't know. He went on to do some good stuff and some not so good stuff, but don't we all,
everybody's got their shortfalls. Everybody's got their issues. I mean, nobody's perfect out there. I always tell people. So at the end of the day, look, it is what it is. You can only learn from those different things. And I wanted to also ask you on being the Pro Wrestling War heavyweight champion of the world. I mean, what was that experience like?
So yeah, that I called it the Epic earlier. That's because it was a epic war. So they like a high, like they got, it was the Epic War heavyweight championship, and Jack Evans was my idol. So like, I worshiped the ground that he walked on. I thought he was so cool. I grew up with a lot of African American friends growing up, and I always wanted to kind of be black. I watched Malibu's Most Wanted, and like, so cool,
That was a good movie. That was a good movie. I remember that in school. I remember that movie very well.
And so I always gravitated towards, the Eric Watts and LTP, like all Scorpio Sky. They were all my good friends, and so then once I met Jack, I was like, dude, this is the ultimate white guy who tries to be black. So I would hang around him, and then finally we ended up working. He was supposed to wrestle Chris Bosch, I think, at the show at the Inoki Dojo, and Bosch didn't show up. So they're like, hey, you're gonna wrestle Jack Evans today. And I was like, oh, okay, and that was kind of a big match. We went in there. I wasn't really ready, but I did my best. And then I ended up working him again. WSX for on MTV. They were like,
I had a feeling that was going to come up because when you were talking about some of the alternative wrestling companies, I remember watching Wrestling Society on MTV there for that little period. I remember
Yep.
that very well. I think X-Pac was a part of that for a couple of
Yeah, he
shows, I
was.
believe.
He was super cool. I used to he used to send me to go get weed for him.
Yeah, he
All right,
seems like
kid.
I've listened to his podcast, and he seemed like a cool dude. I mean, watching him obviously as a kid, but even just listening to him on these different like streams, I've always like, wow, that guy seems like he's a down to earth dude.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, every single person on that show was really cool. The only person that I didn't really get to know and who was kind of standoffish was Seth Rollins. We were the same age, and he would like we would both be unable to go to the bars, and we would stand outside, and he would just sit on his phone and kind of ignore me. And we're just like, dude, we're both here. We could be like friends or something. And he was just never into it. So
Listen, you know what? Each to its
yeah,
own. Listen,
yeah,
each
yeah.
to its
Well,
own.
he went on and did big things. Good for him, you know.
I'd rather, like I said with Leo Rush, I'd rather speak with you than those guys because I've
Yeah,
spoken to the big time people in the sporting world, and I have a background in different things. So I always see good things from people, and I always like to take different things from everybody. But you said something interesting, and I want to go back for a minute on the vegan Superman character because in a lot of ways you think about it, and just from not knowing anything, that's kind of I kind of think a big deal to be a character that in a lot of ways is kind of a positive character for people because you think about it, vegans kind of an alternate life. So although I think it's come a long way from when we were kids 20 years ago, I think being vegan, I mean, you see athletes that really, did that and the clean lifestyle. But I mean, being in a character like that, did you feel like that kind of in a way maybe went into your real life a little bit? I mean, talk to me about that character because I think in a lot of ways that's a kind of real positive character that you were out there with.
well, I mean, it all came from the fact that I did turn vegan, and I got like really into it, and I just really believed in it. And I would have pictures of the vegan Superman, like drawings of him with like animals behind him and stuff, because I love animals, and I got really into just the whole fight for it. And just the character itself, it's just funny because I can play the character the same way as a face that I do as a heel. All I have to do is come out and tell people the veggies are good for them, and they'll boo me. But if I, it's all about the way that you do it, right? Like you can make it like an inclusive thing, or you can make it like a braggart thing where you're just kind of like, no, this is like I'm better than you because I'm vegan, and that's what kind of distinguishes whether I'm face or heel. And then also when I'm face, I do the Popeye spot where my ballet Lois Grain slips me the whatever the kale, and I eat it and I start to Hulk, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I always think back to when I was a little kid. There was a Simpsons episode when Lisa kind of went vegetarian or vegan, and I guess it'd be vegetarian, but I was like, they kind of made it in a way. It was like Homer and Marge were showing her the food, but I was like, you know what? In a way, years later, I'm like, you know what? That's gonna come where it's gonna be. A lot of people are really gonna think that way, but I think it's really such an important character that, in a ways, for a lot of people in the world, it can be a positive role, and I thought that was important to kind of talk about there. And I did want to speak about because when I was looking at your Facebook, I'm like, wow, he knows a couple of people that I actually know. And I want to go one of those people that I know very well on Sportswire. This is such a small world in professional wrestling. And I believe I was either the first or the second person to have ever interviewed him. He's gone on to, I've seen him in AEW Dark. I've seen him wrestle all over the place over the past, I want to say, maybe 16 or 17 months. And that is Ishmael Vaughn. And Ishmael Vaughn, I mean, what a story. He was an athlete, very, very well respected athlete here in California, and going on and accomplished a number of different things here in the professional wrestling. I don't even know if he remembers me in the last several months, but obviously I wanted to ask, because you know him very well, and we had him on. We pretty much, when he was just starting out, and there was one of his friends who I had a connection in the music business from that said, I want you to talk to this person. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever you're telling me, right? Because this guy, very, very well known, Lawrence Michaels, a big time guy, R&B singer, had a record deal. And I'm like, whatever you tell me, I'm going to do it. I want you to speak to this guy. His name is Ishmael Vaughn. So I have to ask you the same question. I mean, Ishmael Vaughn, you've probably seen him kind of from the ground up like I have. And I mean, talk to me about how he's progressed, where he's kind of another one of those emerging guys from the Southern California area.
Yeah, Ish is fantastic. He doesn't really wrestle a lot here in California. There's a lot of politics out here, and I think both Ish and Bandit did the best thing by getting out of California and seeing the rest of the world and building their brand. And in some ways, a lot of people here kind of hold that against them. That now they're kind of leapfrogging them in some ways. And so they don't really wrestle as much down here, but Ish, every time I see him, he gets better. He's got, so much passion, especially when he's in the ring. He's so strong, he's got a great look.
He always had a great look, even when he was a college athlete. This guy had a look that he could have been a wrestler, should have been a wrestler, and he is.
And he is. Yeah, I mean, luckily he is, and luckily he's still passionate. And I know wrestling can be hard on people, especially when they're younger and they're getting started and they don't have the calluses built up yet, so it can cause a lot of people to quit, and he's never quit. If anything, he's doubled down, and he makes sure that everybody knows this is his life, which is he's up there in Pandemonium, having great matches with multiple people in a night. So it's great.
No, absolutely. And I kind of felt when I spoke with him and I was getting to know him when he was just starting out, that this guy with his background, learning from the Nightmare Factory and Cody Rhodes and everything else that he was doing, his own background, his family background, this guy he had something about him. He had some type of desire. When you have a desire and you want something, you're going to go places. And well, I haven't formally interviewed Kid Bandit. I did get to know him a little bit off the air, and we spoke many different times. He's another guy that's gone out there and done a number of different things. And I mean, talk to me about Kid Bandit a little bit, since you spoke about Ish, and obviously those two guys are obviously always intertwined. So just give me a little bit of a thought or two on Kid Bandit.
So I think right now Bandit is going as she. So I think either she or they. Okay. So that's like a big thing. I know that she's been focusing more on wrestling everywhere and promoting that the whole transgender wrestling. And I think that she's doing some great stuff. She's been wrestling all over the place and some big names. And one of my favorite stories, like I've known Bandit since she started, not necessarily like in the beginning, but maybe like a couple months in, I would see her at Pandemonium, and I was managing Honest John against Bandit, and I was like, okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to jump over the top and you're going to give me a hurricanrana while I'm on the outside. So you're going to jump over the top, land on me, and give me the hurricanrana on the floor. And then she was like, okay. And we went out there and we did it. And she slipped, her foot slipped, and she was falling. And I still caught her and was able to kind of do that. And when we went to the back, she was like, you are my guardian angel. And like, since then, like that's kind of just been a running thing where she's mentioned that. And it's kind of nice to be, because most people don't really thank you like that when you
sure.
It's kind of like, well, that's your job, right? To protect me.
Well, listen, kindness can always go a long way in the world. Listen, it's always a two-way street, because there's always going to be a point that you're going to be in that same spot. So you certainly want to be very appreciative. That's at least how I would go about it. And I want to give a shout out to Adam Morgan, who's tuned in with us here on Sportswire. Adam says, woo. Hello, Adam. I don't know. Oh, there we go. Hello, Adam. I feel like I know Adam from somewhere, but I don't know where I know him from. But thank you. Thank you, Adam, for tuning in. And I was curious about something else here. We'll come back to some of the wrestling talk here in a second. But you also dabble into some music, and I wanted to, Jorel, kind of get into that, because you also do some of that. And talk about maybe what kind of got you into playing in a band, and just how that experience has been like.
Well, I've basically been around music my whole life. My dad came here from Cuba like when he was like 8 or 9, and he's always just been really musically oriented. He was kind of like a little Carlos Santana. He'd play like guitar, but he could play like every instrument.
Oh
Like
wow. Okay.
really, really good guitar player. And then he just never was a good singer. Like he's just kind of okay. So when I
Mm-hmm.
growing up, he would always play guitar and I would sing. That was like my thing. I was the singer. I couldn't play any instruments. So it's funny how that happens. And so I would always be like his roadie. So he'd be like in his reggae band and he'd bring me around and I would help carry all his stuff. And then I just in college, I met this dude named Roger and he was like, "Hey, I got a reggae band. You want to come and sing?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then I just never stopped making the music after that. You know, like that band fell apart, then the next band fell apart, and then finally I was like, fuck it. I'm going to take all the music that's ever meant anything to me that I made and just finish an album on my own. And I made the album. Is called Out of My Mind by Vagabonds. Vagabonds is basically like a ghostwriter name. It's just like a brand. And then I go up and whoever's with me, the band is back. It's basically me plus bandmates, you know, whoever whoever shows up. Like yeah, I have some people that are more stable than others, but I mean it's like an army of like 15 musicians I call upon.
That's pretty cool though, because when you do think about Southern California and you think about reggae and ska a little bit, obviously we were speaking off the air, and I obviously Sublime comes to mind automatically because I still
Yeah.
remember being a little kid when the singer had died. It was 1997, I think it was either 96 or
Yeah.
97, and No Doubt sort of comes to mind a little bit, although I think No Doubt kind of veered off a little bit. But it's so kind of interesting to me when I think of Southern California, and it's kind of like you said, a melting pot of different things. You had some people
Yeah.
that were like into hip hop. You had obviously people that were reggae, ska. We talked about wrestling, skateboarding, and earlier on, heavy metal was obviously the Los Angeles, Southern California scene. So it's so interesting how all of this is such a great melting pot, and that's why we're so honored to have here Jorel Diez, who's going to be a part of some huge events coming up here, February the 4th, with our friends over at the Wrestling War Zone, Valley Wrestling Connection, February the 11th. He's doing a great job with those companies. You can see him there as Enoch the Enlightened. You see him occasionally here and there as the Vegan Superman, and also does some music. So we are very, very happy to be with him here for a little while longer. And my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, the man behind Sportswire Radio. And Jorel, I wanted to ask you, I mean, what are your goals for 2023?
I would say my biggest goals are to have a couple more matches, maybe like 3 or 4 matches against people that I really want to wrestle. Like I'm able to hand pick the people that I really want to wrestle, and there's a lot of people that are really good. You know, Chris Nasty, Honest John. You know, the way that Honest John and I are building to our stuff in Pandemonium. I hope, like, I'm not really involved in creative too much. I help a little bit at Pandemonium, but I'm hoping that in a year or so that builds up to me and Honest John in a grudge match, you know, because he's one of the people that I have to wrestle. You know, I have to wrestle Jack again. I have to wrestle Paul London. I have to wrestle Brian Kendrick. I have to wrestle these guys that like I really admire, you know, that it just wouldn't be complete until I wrestle these guys. You know, wrestle Eli Everfly one more time. I mean, that's a guy I've wrestled 100,000 times in my career, but I think we've got one more good one at least, you know. And then just getting Enoch more places, getting out of California. I mean, if the vegan thing can slay in a place in a state where people are so accepting of veganism, I can only imagine how many Texas people I can piss off.
Well, I would say, we have a lot of connections to the UK here on Sportswire Radio. So if you ever want to
UK would
go
be great too.
to companies like GT Ministries, Nonstop Action Wrestling, Odyssey Pro Wrestling, KOW, the LWF. I mean, listen, we'll definitely we'll put the word out there. I mean, some of those guys from those companies, I know are going to definitely pass the word along. When you mentioned, obviously, London and Kendrick, I mean, they were, I believe, it for the longest time, might have been the longest running SmackDown Tag Team Champions, at least up until the Usos. I mean, they had an amazing run. I mean, Paul London gets lost a little bit, but when you think about that 2000s Ruthless Aggression era, I mean, he was really one of the premier high flyers in the WWE. So obviously, Brian Kendrick's a name that is somebody that everybody knows. And Adam Morgan says, I will face vegan guy. I will eat a 10 patty cheeseburger to enhance the feud. Well,
That's great. I,
okay,
I,
well,
I wrestled Delirious and he made me eat a hot dog. So
oh my God. Well, I don't even like a hot dog, and I'm not a vegetarian,
yeah,
vegan. I mean, I really am not a big hot dog person to begin with. I wouldn't say that I'm vegan or a vegetarian, but I try to be limited in my portions. But certainly, we have our support here on Sportswire Radio for all of those endeavors. And I was curious on this question. I always like to ask people, especially somebody like yourself who's had a decorated career in the world of professional wrestling. Is there one or two moments that maybe stand out most in your career?
um, I mean, I would have to say that moment beating Jack Evans for the Epic Championship. I mean, that was just one of the greatest moments of my life. And then what we had talked about earlier was beating Leo Rush, which was the resurgence of my career as Vegan Superman. I mean, I was probably hotter in the year as Vegan Superman as I was in 12 years of being Marcus Riot in the beginning of my career, and then I went on to be Jacob the Riot Diez, and I was never as over as I was Vegan Superman for a year and a half.
Very, very impressive. And I was kind of curious before we get to closing thoughts, because I know you're a busy man. You've got constant stuff to do and everything else that's on your mind. But in a way, do you feel like because you're doing different roles in wrestling, that regardless of whatever amount of matches that you have, that you're actually kind of in a way prolonging your wrestling career? Because when you think about all the different people that maybe, let's say, become agents or bookers or whatever you want to call the terms, owners of small companies, I kind of feel like just as if you're in the sports world and you're done playing, you have options. Would you like to be a coach? Would you like to be a general manager? Would you like
Yeah.
to be a scout? Whatever it might be. Do you kind of feel like the same way, that actually, in a way, you're actually prolonging your career because you're taking on these different hats and these different roles?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if I would have still remained a wrestler, I would have never been a manager. And then who knows if I would have ever gotten into that. Like so many people, once they lose wrestling, they kind of lose their mind and they can't even imagine being something else. Where I love doing commentary. I got to do commentary with Jordan Castle at
Wow.
Pride Style last week, 2 weeks ago, and it was awesome. It was just great going out there and just being heel on commentary, and it was a blast. Like as long as I get to be Enoch, I get to wear my shield, and I can be, it doesn't matter. It was halfway through the show, and they're like, "You're just gonna walk out, and you're gonna be like his friend who called in, and you're just gonna step in and do commentary. Okay, just walk straight in. Don't even acknowledge the crowd." And it was like, okay, I just gotta like snap in and just be in character the moment that I sit down, because I don't want to look like a fool. And then after the show, Jordan Castle was like, dude, you did a great job. You should have him back. So like, to me, that means I earned my spot when he didn't really know me, in that sense. So,
That's pretty cool, because it's funny you say this, because I had on a wrestler yesterday, Prince Charles, and he's more of a commentator, but he's sort of actually going the other way. He's kind of shifting into wrestling a bit. He's doing
oh,
it
nice.
kind of in a more gradual role with Wrestling Championship Entertainment. And I asked him, I'm like, well, if you like certain wrestlers, how do you be objective? Well, if you like another wrestler, but if then you have to be on the microphone, do you kind of have to walk things back? And he was like, no, well, you kind of let it come to you, let it flow. You certainly, you pick, you choose your spots. And I thought that was so fascinating. Did you always want to go into commentating? I mean, was that something as a kid, or when you were wrestling, was that something in the back of your mind? Because I could see you have such a knowledge for the sport of professional wrestling, but was commentating something you ever thought, hey, that's something I want to do?
No, I was Jorel the wrestler, man, my whole life. Like that's what I've always been, and that's why it was so hard for me to step away. But I was someone who relied on doing the moves for so much of my life. Like I was the flippy guy. I was the guy who, like, with the Bucks, with B-Boy, with Cholo, we started that whole style that they do now with all the moves. Like when I was wrestling my friend Junior, we were the ones on the show that were being talked by Adam Pierce. That was like, dude, you guys did too much. And now that's what everybody does. That's like the style that every single person does on each show. And so I wish that I had kind of done it the other way, where I had learned the psychology aspects of it so I could understand what I'm doing in the ring, because I just always wanted to do moves. I always just wanted to look cool. And now it's like, dude, I just get it. Everything is slowed down. Instead of throwing 5 punches, you throw one real good one and you get way more leverage out of that. People react, like they care more. It doesn't matter what you do. It's how you make them feel. Because no one's going to remember your triple Canadian destroyer at the end of the match. They're going to remember, the guy that made pizza that whipped it around his leg and got an
Well, that's very similar because you play music. That's always similar when I've heard this because I have a little bit of a background in music, not to the level of you, but I studied music in college, and my dad was a music teacher, played the drums. My brother played a little bit, so my mother sings. So I know music very well. So that I have a little bit of an ear for it. They always say in music, there's an acronym called KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So sometimes when you see, like, let's say, like,
Yeah.
everybody would mock the drummer from the Rolling Stones or AC/DC because, they do the same 3 chords. Angus does the same little soul. But you know what? That actually works because
Okay.
that 3 or 4 minute song, what they're doing, Nirvana was another example. Nirvana was the classic 3 chord band. But you know what? It works. You don't have to do the 10 guitar solos or the 10 big verses or the scream at the top of your lungs because you know what? At the end of the day, people sometimes they react in different ways. So it's kind of like the same way from what you're talking about in wrestling. Not
Yeah.
everybody wants to see a 60-minute Iron Man match. People
Yeah.
just want to see something that they can get along to and follow along. And I have a comment from another fellow wrestler that I do want to give a big shout out to. That is, of course, the new Messiah, Nicholas Crenson. He is one of my favorites. He also wrestled in an Iron Man match this summer. Speaking of that, he says, wrestling is why I'm still alive. So I get that feeling it meant a lot to you. Is that something that's a great question from a fellow wrestler? And is that something that you feel like that wrestling means a lot to you? Did it keep you alive? I mean, just for him, it I guess it might have, but what about for you?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Like that linked with like music, like Linkin Park, just having, without wrestling, I don't have a group of friends. Like you realize once you step away how lonely it is, because you just go back and you're with your family, and your family's great. But when I'm in wrestling, I have 3,000 friends. I have all the people that I see every single week. I'm meeting new people. They're adding me. They're following me. When I post stuff, I see all the people that I see. They're all checking out my stuff, all 90, 100, 200 people that I interact with. I'm looking at all these familiar faces. The moment that I step away, that stops, and I just become a human. I just become a normal person. And I might not be able to wrestle as much in the ring, but as Enoch, I've become just as much of a character as I've ever had in wrestling. I've never ever had something that was synonymous where people want, hey, I want to wear glasses like Enoch. Enoch's so cool. I'm going to wear a bow tie or whatever. I've never really had that. And that's because I didn't have anything. I was just the guy, I was Joe Eric, whatever. They were just 2 names, the guy that's just the wrestler. And it's not what we fell in love with. And looking at all the cool moves, you forget that you fell in love with how wrestling made you feel, not the moves.
Absolutely. Listen, at the end of the day, I mean, I go back to the same thing. It's really, listen, people remember Stone Cold Steve Austin, right? But he didn't do, after his neck injury, he didn't do the most types of things. I mean, The Rock was another example. Yes, The Rock could do certain things, but those great, John Cena, another example. I mean, listen, not everybody has to do those crazy moves off the top rope. Not everybody has to do a move that impresses. Yes, there's an audience for it, and I do have some more comments. I have a few more here. Let me go to first Adam Morgan. So if people want to talk, I'll keep going. And that's, I think, what people like you. So we had a guy face a broom at our event, and people got behind it. It really felt like the broom was alive. A lot of broom, broom, broom chants.
That's
People
great.
even took pictures with the broom after the show. Was it the old expression before I get to Nicholas Crenson again that Ric Flair could wrestle a broom and it would still be a great match? I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that was the reason that I'm pretty sure I heard that. And before I get to Darrow is with us here. Let me get to Nicholas Crenson. Nicholas says, taking the time to tell a story is what makes an excellent match. Yeah, you can have a few crazy spots, but if you just do nothing, but
Yep.
it's just the crazy spots like Sami Zayn versus Nakamura from Takeover. Yeah, I remember that very well. Will be remembered more in time because it's about telling a story in the most simple ways. I'll come back to that in a second, but I do want to get to the man that is responsible for us speaking. That is, of course,
Yeah.
Darrow Johnson. I guess the President Obama standalone, maybe President Obama's stunt
President
double here.
Obama.
The stunt
Woo!
double. He's one of the reasons why Wrestling Warzone is getting out there. I would definitely probably agree with that. I'm sure there are other reasons as well because a lot of great people do great things. But I want to come back, and I'll come back to Darrow again in a second. But what Crenson said here, do you feel the same way that it's so important about that storytelling? Because again, you're a wrestler, but you're also now a manager. You're also a guy that's watching everybody's match, I'm sure, and watching it in a different way because you're looking to figure out, okay, well, how can I go forward with the next feud or the next match, or the next storyline, the next show? So is that important from, like, let's say, your perspective now that you're watching it with so many different hats about the point of storytelling in a wrestling match?
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest thing that I would tell any young wrestlers. Like it's so hard. I have my friend Biagio Crescenzo. He's one of the best wrestlers I've ever met, and every single match he goes out there and does 15, 16 spots, takes 27 bumps. And when we're on the same show, we went on the same show recently, and I went out there and I had the whole crowd in the palm of my hands, and I took 2 bumps, and nobody knows that I took 2 bumps. The whole entire match, I wrestled Tortuga. Tortuga took
Oh, okay.
1 bump. He took two. Actually, he took 2. He caught me on a crossbody, and I gave him a spine buster at the end of the match. After giving him 3 Superman punches and a low blow, and like we made all of our false finishes count. We had 1 each. And the crowd was so invested, and yet Biagio goes out there and he's a good heel, but he's in the corner. He kicks the guy. He does a front flip over them. The guy gives him a hip toss, lands on his feet. Then he gives him a super kick, and it's like, what? It's like, why did you do all of those other movements just to do the super kick when you could have just gotten more traction out of just going straight into the kick or doing something heel? And that's just such a it's not that it's a lost art. It's just that's all that is shown on TV now, like with AEW. That's why, like, you watch their matches and it's just like, here's a Canadian Destroyer. Now they're back up because then now they got to get to the next spot. So they don't have time to sell.
They're playing to a certain audience that is very, how can I put it, particular. They're a certain crowd. How can I put this without offending anybody? They're almost kind of like what we used to say in the Attitude Era is like the smarks,
Yeah.
the smart wrestling crowd, where it's got to be a certain way, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. But I go back again. And again, I'm not a professional wrestler, but I know the music world, and I know that
Yeah.
sometimes, again, that Charlie Watts slow drumming, or
Yeah.
listen, that Phil Rudd drum kick, or
Keep it
Angus
simple,
Taylor.
stupid.
Exactly. And I think with wrestling, that's why I kind of wanted to ask, because I have so many wrestlers that have already tuned into this. I speak with wrestlers all over the world. And I thought this would be a good question to ask you, kind of thinking about it here, because you've done so many things in the professional wrestling world. And I'm not trying to blow smoke up your behind, but what advice would you give to any wrestler out there?
You only have one chance at making a first impression. I mean, sure, there's such things as like a redemption tour, but nobody wants to start at the bottom of the hill. So, like, when you're starting out, what really matters is finding out who you are. Because, again, it takes people a long time. It took me, I mean, I was 30 years old and 29, 30 years old when I made Vegan Superman. I started when I was 15. It took me 14 years to find a character. And that's number one. Number one is finding your character, become grounded, be humble, shake people's hands, go to shows and help out, treat people with respect. I mean, all the other stuff doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter how good your work rate is. If you can entertain a crowd, the rest of the stuff will come. If you're really passionate and you want to become a work rate wrestler, be a work rate wrestler, but make it make sense. Just you can have both. You can have your cake and eat it too. You can be why do you think we watch stuff like Eddie Guerrero's matches, against I mean, Rey Mysterio? Even those
Yep.
matches were spot fests, they still took the time to sell, and they told a story that made you feel a certain way, you know? Like that's just what's missing is we're trying to do the moves without doing any of the substance. I mean, you can't just do flips for no reason. There has to be a reason.
Well, also, I think now, what do I know, right? Before I get to Nicholas Crenson again, you do a lot of these different things. You're also risking a lot to your body as well because
Yeah.
there are certain wrestlers. I mean, you saw it. Listen, with Jeff Hardy's an example, and Shawn Michaels the first time when these guys listen. And God bless. I mean, you're talking basically like 1A and 1B, right? Of wrestlers from a certain generation. But I mean, you do a lot of that stuff. You talked about earlier. You talked about basically like you don't want to wrestle as much anymore. And there's a thing called a bump card where you're going
Yeah.
out there and wrestling, and you're putting a lot on your body. I mean, I had heard, I think it was Velvet Sky in an interview talk about the fact that like she's got like significant neck issues and she's still, I would say, not even 40. So you think about what you're doing to your body. And it's like anything else. You want to think about those decisions. Think about not only for yourself, but also the opponent that you're in the ring with. So I think all these things that you're saying, and also about kind of paying, not quite paying your dues, but being respectful to the other wrestlers. I interview a lot
Yeah.
of wrestlers from England. We have a big following on Sportswire with that. And I always hear that. I ask that same question to every wrestler, and they tell me the same thing. So I thought that you would give that answer, and I think it shows basically how important that you are. Nicholas Crenson wants to add. Funny thing is, one of my big moves is a destroyer, but I rarely ever pull it out because it just feels better to save it for the right moment. Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't need to do the same move 15 times in a match. And you know what? I don't want to go on a soapbox real quick before I get to one or two more questions with you. I know you're a busy man, but it's so funny, though, that AEW, that certain crowd, who are two of the bigger wrestlers that they have, and ironically, they all love them: Sting and Chris Jericho. They're
Yeah.
not doing. I heard this in a podcast the other day. Chris Jericho is not doing what Chris Jericho did in 1996.
Nope.
Sting is 63. When I watch a Sting match, it's not Sting versus Flair, Starrcade 90. I'm not seeing the same Sting matches that I saw in like 1993. These are
Right.
basically matches where they're bringing the crowd in, they're doing certain things, and that's the whole point about professional wrestling. So it's almost like, again, going back to music, a call and response thing. So those are all great things here. And then I wanted to ask you then this last question before I get to closing thoughts. And especially, I want to do this because Darrow has been a great supporter of mine over the past several weeks. And obviously, it's a tremendous honor to have you in the current moment. What do you want to say to anybody that's watching this or listening to this, and for the first time they're hearing the Wrestling Warzone and the Valley Wrestling Connection? What do you want to say to those people to get them involved and to support especially these two great companies that you're a part of?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I feel that what the cards that we put together, the talent that we put together, are just the epitome of Southern California wrestling. You want to know what we're about? We've got a little bit of everything from lucha, American. You know, it's going to be that perfect melting pot, just like California is. I think that if you give it a chance, that you'll be really impressed. I mean, from Vito to Eddie Islas to Brandon Gatson, Wicket, Haas Hogg. We've got so many people that could be stars elsewhere, and yet SoCal just hasn't given them that platform, which is just, I mean, I don't even want to get started about how SoCal has been like slacking on elevating talent. I mean, there's so many people, and the only people that have come out of the last 7 years, Young Bucks, Scorpio Sky recently, Joey Ryan, Willie Mack recently, within the last couple of years. I mean, who else really? Brody King. I mean, it's like on one, like two hands in the last decade that have really made a big name for themselves. I can't really think that are SoCal originals that weren't like went to WWE and then got, came out of the system or whatever, So, I mean, Scorpio Sky is Scorpio Sky, and that's who he's made his name in SoCal. But yeah, like if you guys can come check us out, I think we're going to be streaming. Hopefully, we're going to get a deal with IWTV soon. So
okay. I know IWTV.
That way we reach out to them soon. This show, we're going to be streaming like on the Roku, which is like, ancient technology, but it's better than some people that really don't get any footage at all. So you got to start somewhere.
You know what?
You know?
In England, they had for a while there was a guy that was doing a website, but he wound up. I actually, and I have more questions for you. People like you. I mean, so I get that. But so I'll keep going as long as people want to talk to you. That's kind of how it goes. But there was a company that was streaming a lot of these independent wrestling shows, and I actually wanted to buy the website, but the guy was like, it was a long process. I know it's very hard sometimes with these companies when it comes to streaming content and finding different sources and then putting it together. And some people do Patreon pages. One of our supporters, Odyssey Pro Wrestling, does that. Some others do like select YouTube matches. Nonstop Action Wrestling does Instagram, like on a handheld phone, and they post that. So I know it's tough. And Daryl also wants to remind me, keep your eyes on the Enlightened, See Love, and Trivco, etc. And I have a feeling that we might be speaking about these people live between now and February the 4th, because I know Daryl and I have been speaking about different things about the Wrestling War Zone. And Nicholas Crenson has a question for you, so I'll let him ask it.
Yeah.
You work with Mikey O'Shea ever?
Yeah, that's my boy. Why? What's up? He's awesome. He's a good worker and he's super entertaining. TikTok guy.
Well, anything you'd like to ask the new Messiah Nicholas Crenson about Mikey O'Shea while we're here for a few more minutes? I'll leave it open for a minute or two if there was a follow-up that you had there for that, because we have here the man that knows a lot of people. I mean, listen, I could ask you about all these different names, but my rule of thumb is, I get it, you know the who's who of people, but I like to make it about you, what you're promoting, because everybody can get starstruck and fan stuff. But to me, it's about the companies here. But Nicholas Crenson's response is, he's someone I know from back in the day from YouTube before he started training, and he was proud to see how far he's come. Because a little backstory of Nicholas Crenson. Nicholas Crenson's been wrestling, I would say, just about as long as you have. I think he's been in it for about 18 or 19 years, Nicholas.
Oh, wow.
That's why he asked you that question. So that's anything else you want to add on Mikey O'Shea for Nicholas Crenson? Anything else that before we get to closing thoughts?
No, Mikey's super humble. He's fantastic. I've known him since he used to be sitting in the crowd as a fan. I remember he always gives this memory of me where I was like a heel that would always chant my own name. I'd be like, Marcus, Marcus. And the crowd started chanting along with me. And I was like, holy crap, that actually worked. And he thought that was just hilarious. And he quotes that story to me every once in a while. But then he went on to train with Mach 1 and do a lot of really good things. And he stayed humble. He's never, ever changed. He's a lovely human. So I'm very happy for him. And then I was going to say, as far as Europe goes and England itself.
Yes, we have a lot of fans on Sportswire from there. So yes,
since I was a little boy, my dad has been in love with England. Everything about it. And I grew up listening to Suede, Manic Street Preachers, Strange Love, Radiohead, Muse. And I mean, he took me out to, we went when I was 21, we went to, we were in London and took a car straight from London and went all the way up to Scotland and went to Tea in the Park, which was like a 3-day festival. So I freaking love every single thing about Europe. And if I could get out there one day to be a manager, to wrestle, I mean, I'd wrestle. Screw my body, bro. I
will tell you this, that there's a wrestler. I don't know if you probably know his name. And there's a guy a promoter out, because again, we have a lot of friends on Sportswire from England, and I really appreciate all of their support. But there was a promoter out there that had actually got us in touch with a guy, Franco Varga, who does tours in England. I don't know if you know Franco Varga. He wrestled EC3 earlier this year. He wrestled Rikishi back when Rikishi was still a little bit more active. Jacob Fatui was in the ring with him, almost certain, of the MLW World Champion, and he does the tours. And he's this American guy. He's from more of my neck of the woods, but I know we're going to have him back on because I don't know if I'm at liberty to say this, but I'll say it because they're sleeping. He's going on another UK tour, and he's going to come back to Sportswire. So I'll make sure that I name drop your name for Franco Varga, and we'll certainly see what happens there for all of that. But I know you're a busy Yeah, well, I'll make sure. I'll definitely make sure. I think he's going on tour. I want to say late January because all of the big shows in England are starting up either the first week in February or the second week. So I'm pretty sure that's what I have in the notes. So I'm pretty sure we'll definitely drop your name and I'll see what I can do there for sure with that.
All
But
right.
I know you're a busy man. You've got a lot going on in your plate. You probably got a litany of things to do and promote. So I want to give you the floor now. I want to give you some closing thoughts. Anything that you want to plug, share, say for us. And I am very honored to have had the opportunity to speak with you. I'm very glad that we have connected. And anything I can do in the future, please let me know. But in the meantime, I give you the floor, and the floor is yours. And anything you want to plug on social media or anything else, fire away.
I mean, I've been plugging relentlessly. I mean, check out Valley Wrestling Connection. Check out Wrestle Warzone. Play this awesome game, Chrono Trigger. It's one of the underrated gems of our childhood, I'm sure. Man, just support indie wrestling. Check out, Mikey O'Shea. Check out Brandon Gatson. Check out Sea Love. Check out all of these fantastic people, Vito Fratelli, Biagio Crescenzo. I mean, so many great wrestlers. Honest John, Haas Hogg. I mean, I could go all day. Just support.
Please do. All I do is speak with independent wrestling. People ask me, They say, Tom, what's the stock market like? I say, if it's not involved wrestling, I don't know. So please go ahead on wrestling. Drop it all for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, check out everything in SoCal. Support Southern California, Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, Empire Wrestling Federation. Support Pandemonium Pro Wrestling, Amped Up. I mean, there's so many companies that are just California-based that have so much good talent that just need to be seen, Finest City Wrestling, One Ring Circus. Check out Vegas companies, Pride Pro, Pride Style Pro, Future Stars Wrestling. Man, there's just all day. I mean, I'm gonna sit here all day and throw them off the top of my head and end up repeating.
Oh, listen, that reminds me of the lyric in Conan had a theme song in WCW where he rapped and he said all day, every day. And that was kind of one of the lines. You could probably go all day, every day when it comes to all these different companies. But in all seriousness, we love all of them here on Sportswire Radio. I will do whatever I can in any ways possible to help these companies, but especially the Wrestling Warzone and the Valley Wrestling Connection, where you're going to see Jorel Diez here and all these great things that this company has to offer starting February the 4th, February the 11th. The shows are also going to be take place in March and throughout the year. You can also follow Jorel on Instagram as well for all the great things that he does. That is Enoch_the_enlightened. Please make sure to follow him on all the great things that he does. Valley Wrestling Connection as well on Instagram. So, my friend, Happy New Year. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. I'm looking forward to speaking with you more in the future, and let's keep on plugging away.
And if you guys are looking to come out to California, if you're out here, you guys always have a shot with us. Just send me a message. You guys
we had guys on at the beginning. I mean, Nicholas Kretzen's also a wrestler for Wrestling Championship Entertainment. So I have a feeling that these guys are going to message you on Facebook here. I'm almost pretty certain of that. But we'll definitely see all that here. Yep.
You show me yours. I'll show you mine as far as bookings go.
Well, it sounds like a deal there. We'll see if it's a fair trade, but we want to thank everybody here for tuning in tonight on Sportswire Radio. I will be back, like I said, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. British Standard Time, 12 p.m. Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, with Joel Cobra from GT Ministries and Cutlery Championship Wrestling's Modern Day Mafia. I'll be back then at about 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time with C2K, Courage to Kill, and then I'll be back tomorrow, Thursday. We'll be in England. It's Thursday tomorrow. Thursday, I'll be back 9 p.m. British Standard Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Time with Chris Murphy, the Irish Wonder, multiple champion. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in here with Jorel Diez. My name is the Reverend Tom Bryce. If you're on sportnarium.com/player, you'll go back to your regularly scheduled programming later on here. And thank you. Good night. Thank you, Jorel. Happy New Year to everybody. Be safe. Be well. We are here on the number one